We're very excited to have Carrie Watts, head assistant coach at University of British Columbia with us today. Thanks for joining us, Carrie.
Thanks for having me.
So you're one of the few coaches that has had, a very illustrious playing career. So let's go back to the beginning. Where'd you grow up? What was that like? When did you get started playing basketball?
I grew up in a small town, Agassiz, BC. Most people don't know where it is. It's right by Harrison Hot Springs. That seems to be a destination more people are a bit familiar with. It was a really small town. I think we had about 4,000 people in the town. My high school was about 350 kids from grade 7 to 12. My grad class was about 50. So it was quite a small school, but really fortunate. Both my parents were coaches. I have 3 siblings. We all played basketball growing up. And because my parents were coaching, I have a twin sister. And so we were at the gym, putting the playpen on the stage while my parents coach practice, coaching my brother's team and things like that. So we've been around the game for as long as I can remember. I think I started playing organized, 7, 8 years old. But it's just, we've always been at the gym. After school was done, we'd walk over to the high school and wait for my dad to finish up. He was a teacher at the school as well. So we've just always had access. There's been a love of the game in my family. And that's just something that I've always had as part of my life, which has been really fortunate.
So how'd your high school teams do?
We did pretty well. We were a single A school that we played single A in grade 10 and then jumped up to double A in grade 11 and 12. And that was a choice we were given, whether to stay in double A or whether the team wanted to move up. And we all chose to move up because it was going to be a more competitive schedule. We'd get to play stronger teams, and we thought we would still have a chance to win in double A, and we made it to provincials both years. Can't remember, I don't think we ever cracked the top 5, but we were, in that mix and one of the top teams in the Fraser Valley, both those years that we went up to double A. So we were really glad for the experience. It was a, interesting group because we only barely ever had 10 people at practice just because the size of the school. There was a group of 4 of us that kind of went through from grade 7 to 12 all the way through together. Me and my twin, we were really committed and played a lot of basketball outside. The other 2, were dedicated in season, but didn't really do any training outside. And kind of the other 4 or 5 on the team were people we'd kind of drag out and say, come play, so we'd have enough bodies for practice. So in terms of, the training compared to what you guys are doing with your club and the opportunities that people have now, it wasn't there as much, but, we made the best and we had great coaching. And my dad was my coach, so I get to say that, but it was a great situation.
Yeah. I talk to kids all the time about having to drag people to practice with them. Like, you need other people. Like, you can't just do it by yourself. And that people like to think that ends in high school, but it happens at university. You got to drag people to the weight room. You got to drag them into shooting practice. It's like, if you want to be successful, you need those other people with you, right? So tell us about getting recruited by UBC, what other, places recruited you, and kind of like what gave you what made you come up with the conclusion that UBC was the right place for you to go to school?
Well, it was funny. I actually had Deb as my coach when I was 14 on a BC Summer Games team. So she was just kind of early on in her coaching career. I don't even think she'd started at UBC or had just started at UBC at that point. But I had her as my coach when I was 14, and we kind of maintained that relationship through the next couple of years of high school. And then, I played provincial teams, did, whatever existed for club stuff. We drive out to Abbotsford for spring leagues and things like that. And there were some schools that were interested down in the States. It's funny, I was listening to Erica's session with you guys the other day, and she was mentioning some of the schools that were way down south or small schools. And that was similar with me, smaller schools kind of farther away. And I wasn't really interested in going down to the States. That was never really something that was appealing, especially a smaller school that was really far away. So I knew I wanted to stay in Canada. I had some other interests from University of Manitoba, some schools back east. And it was just, I somehow kind of always felt like I wanted to go to UBC. I'd been there to watch games. And my parents had taken us out to watch games, and then just having that relationship with Deb. And I knew it was close enough to home. It was a big school, and that was really appealing to me coming from a small town. I liked the idea of being at a big school. And so it just felt like a good fit, knowing Deb, having that relationship. And also, I think there are a lot of times when you go to a campus and it's got to meet the requirements. It was a great education. It was a big school. Those are some things that were important to me. But then when you go, you're going to have a feeling, and it's going to be a feeling you can see yourself there, or it's going to be a feeling where you're not really sure. And I had those other criteria that the university met. And then when I went, it was a feeling that I just knew, and it's been a good decision.
Yeah, for sure. Clearly it's worked out.
Yeah.
So you went there as a freshman. It's always interesting seeing players come in just before things get really, really good. And so, obviously you finish your career with a national championship, which obviously is the ultimate way to finish it off. But talk about having to build to get to that. What was your team like when you got there, and what was the journey like to get to that finishing spot of winning in your last game?
We'd never been to nationals in my 5 years. And I think actually Deb had been there, I think 7 or 8 years when I got there, and she hadn't made it to nationals, and the team hadn't been to nationals in that time. And so I think 3 of my first 4 years, I remember going over to UVic and losing to UVic, and we had to go into that classroom that they use as a team room back before Carsa was built. And that was the way our season ended for 3 out of 4 years. I think we had some great components, and then that year we finally won. I think it was an interesting group because we had a really big rookie class. I think we had 6 rookies in that year, and Erica was one of them, but it was a really strong group. And we had some veteran players, and I think one of the things with that is, people kind of filled a role. We had Amanda Beers, who played, she had transferred from CAP, who came in, and she was a great defender. Jessie Evans, another player that I played with, came from Langara. She was just a spot up shooter, and she didn't get a lot of time, but she could come in and knock down an open shot when it was needed. And, Erica coming in as a rookie just brought tremendous confidence and ability to step up in big moments. We had solid post play. It was just lots of complementary pieces. And I don't know, you'd say sometimes the experience of being at nationals year after year gives you that confidence. We didn't have that, so maybe we were naive a little bit when we got there that, we're happy to be here, and it just is just a great group. And, like you said, there was no better way to go out. We actually beat SFU in the semifinal, and that was almost as much of a satisfying game as winning in the final, just because we had such a huge rivalry with them, and we played them I think 4 times that year. Like, we played them a ton, and so that was great. And then with Regina, when we beat them in the final, Deb probably mentioned this story, that we got our butts kicked in the Canada West final 2 weeks right before nationals. We played Regina in their gym in the Can West final, and they beat us like ridiculous, like 40 points or something. I think it was like 73-30 or something crazy. And that's who we ended up facing off in the final at nationals. And so, 2 weeks earlier, they pounded us, and it was just getting to beat them, after we had been embarrassed 2 weeks earlier, was a really good feeling too.
No kidding. Well, you know what? I'm going to have to dig in on that one. Tell me a little bit about that. So you lose by 40. Usually when you lose by 40, that means you're not winning the next one, especially 2 weeks later, unless you got some transfers mid-season. What caused, as a team, you obviously there's got to be a lot of mental things that have to kick in for that to happen. Talk about what it takes to make that sort of adjustment.
Yeah, well, I think it was, the game that we lost by 40, it was in their gym. They were hosting the Can West Final Four, and it was just one of those games that nothing could go right, and it's like everything that could go wrong went wrong. And we knew that by being at the Final Four, the way the playoffs and the burst to nationals worked that year, we knew that we were going to nationals already anyway. So that kind of wasn't anything that was on the line, but it was just one of those games that couldn't ever go as bad again as it did that night. And then we went into nationals with the 2 seed ranked behind Regina. They got the 1 seed going in. And I think it was just, you know, we played in our first game. We got a huge lead in the first half, and then it kind of turned. Actually, Erica was a huge savior in that game in the second half, just to have us win, because I can't even remember who it was. I think it was U of T came back and gave us a run for our money in that game. We held on and then had a good win against SFU. And I think it was just the confidence of kind of going through one where we managed to hang on, having a good win against a rival that felt really good. And, you know, they always say there's the curse of the one seed, going in as the one seed. And I think, you know, as much mentally for us, knowing that things couldn't ever be as bad as they had been in that previous game. And I think probably for Regina too, the confidence that they had, having beat us by 40 points, who knows if they're getting a bit complacent or comfortable or kind of thinking they've got things in the bag already. But we were comfortable in that game. And, you know, I think it's as much us fighting as them maybe lightening up a little bit. And those are the things that happen in sport that make it so unpredictable and exciting.
Yeah, being prepared to take it to them every day is definitely something that you got to see all the time. So then you end up graduating. What did you graduate with?
I went through in kinesiology, human kinetics, it was called back then. And at that point, I was kind of not happy, but I was pretty sure that was going to be it for my playing career. You know, I had never done anything, you know, and the national team program wasn't as extensive as it is right now. I hadn't done anything with that through university. And I thought, you know, when I graduated, I went on and did another year of school to get my teaching degree. I did that at UBC as well. And that was going to be it for me. And then about halfway through that year, doing my teaching degree, it's kind of like, you know, I'm not ready to be done yet. You know, when you graduate, whether it's after 4 years or 5 years, you're really just figuring things out basketball wise at 22, 23 years old. The game kind of slows down a bit. You figure things out. You're kind of finally maturing physically, and for so many women, that's kind of when the game stops, and you've just figured it out. So it is a tough situation. Halfway through that year of my teaching degree, I wasn't really playing at all, and I kind of didn't want to be done yet. And I think, you know, not having the game there every day makes you realize how much you love it and how important it is. And so that I started about halfway through my teaching year, just training again, getting in the gym. You know, I work out with the UBC girls in the spring, and my plan had been that following year, instead of starting teaching, to try and get a contract playing overseas. That was what the plan was. And that year they happened to be doing a university games team, a FISU team. And I was still eligible because I was still in university. And so I thought, oh, well, I'm going to try out for that. And I went, and they had an open tryout. I think they held one in BC, one in Ontario, and one somewhere else. So I went to the open tryout, and it's kind of a token thing that they have to do. And I had a really good tryout, and I ended up getting invited to the national team camp, where they had everybody there, and they were picking the FISU team and the senior team. They were all kind of training together. And I had a really good tryout, and I ended up getting selected for the senior team. And that was like beyond my wildest imagination. I'd kind of gone in, I'm thinking, I think I have a good shot at the FISU team. I think that is something that's really good. And I remember when I went into the meeting, and Allison McNeil was coaching at the time, she's like, we're going to keep you for the senior team. I was like flabbergasted. So from that camp, we went basically like 3 months straight. And they do things differently now too, but we were in training camp. We did a tour of Europe, where we went to France, we went to Belgium, we went to Spain, all in that summer. And I ended up so that would have been a World Championship qualifier year. I ended up not making that final roster because some of the WNBA players had come back. And so I got cut right before that last one. And then I came home, and after being away for that long, I wasn't ready to go away to a pro career. And so I stayed home, and I trained and taught and worked and all that kind of stuff. And then the next year, senior team made that again, ended up making that World Championship roster. So we got to go to the World Championships in Sao Paulo in 2006, that would have been. So incredible experience. And then had one more summer. And, you know, it was a really interesting experience for me, because until that point, I'd kind of never been in that position where you're like that 12th, 13th player, and you may get to go, you may not get to go. And I ended up getting cut that following year. That would have been an Olympic qualifying year, and I didn't get to go to that final tournament. So I think that was just a really interesting perspective, because I'd never really had that being in that position of that last player on the bench. So I think that it's been really valuable for me as a coach personally, just because I've gone through that perspective. I've been kind of the go-to star player in important situations, but I've also been that, I don't know if I'm going to dress, I don't know if I'm going to get cut. And I think that's just been a really helpful experience for me to go through, that I can, bring with me now as a coach.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's always good to have every perspective that you can in a situation, and kind of, you can kind of guide everybody a little bit better. Now, so you play on the national team, you go. I think that's a huge testament to just being prepared and being ready. And if you never know when your moment's coming, you just got to be ready for it, which is very cool. How do you get into coaching?
I always knew that I wanted to coach. Again, grew up in that background. I had always expected to be teaching, is what my plan was. Both my parents were teachers, all my siblings are teachers, and it's kind of in the blood a little bit. And I had anticipated coaching through high school, and that's, I was happy, and I that was what I had planned. And it's better now, but there aren't as many opportunities to be a professional coach in Canada. And so it's not something I had ever really thought about. And then, so I was teaching for a couple of years after I finished playing, and then this full-time position opened up at UBC. Up till that point, they'd had part-time assistant coaches, and in 2006, actually, they created a full-time assistant coach position for the women's basketball team. And then in 2007, that position was offered to me. And I think partly it was, I've had a good relationship with Deb. I've played for her. So in terms of knowing the team and the style of play and the values and the expectations, having a former player in that position is always really helpful. And I'd been coaching with, regional teams and Basketball BC things and Center Performance when they had that, and coaching at high school. And so again, it was kind of an opportunity that came up because of the relationships that I'd had, because of the experiences that I had. And so I've been there since 2007. Which has been incredibly fortunate. It's a great position to be able to learn from Deb as somebody who's been so accomplished herself as a coach, to get to develop relationships with other coaches across the country, and to just learn and grow and, figure things out, how I want to do things when it's my turn in that position as a head coach, wherever that may be. So I think it's just been a great learning opportunity for the past 13 years, I guess it's been.
Yeah, no kidding. Time flies. I remember when
I know.
Doesn't seem 13 years ago.
I know.
I guess I'm older than I think. So you guys have obviously, teams have been very good. You guys were the last team that actually gave Saskatchewan a game this year. Very close to getting it. Talk about, UBC arguably is the best job in the country, in my opinion. So you have all the resources at UBC. You have beautiful campus. It's one of only two places I actually felt like I needed to go to school when I went on the campus before, but that's a different story for another time. But you go there and it's beautiful. It's fantastic. You got all the courses. Talk about, what it's like to present the case that is so overwhelming when you're trying to recruit some kids, and what type of kids you guys are looking for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I completely agree with you. And again, we are maybe biased opinions because we're alumni, but I think when we talk about with recruits about things to consider when you're picking a university, there's kind of three main components that we generally talk about: the academics, the athletics, and where you're going to be living. And we feel so fortunate at UBC that we can kind of check the box for all of those things. If you are an academically driven student, you don't have to worry about, graduating and nobody's going to know what university you're getting a degree from, or if you want to go on to grad school or things like that, that a UBC degree is going to be well respected around the world. So that's a big check mark for us. And then the athletics program. We are really fortunate to be very well supported from our athletics department. They really value athletics, they value excellence. And so we're, that's a big check mark from that standpoint too. And then where you get to live. So I think there's some universities that do offer great athletics, great academics, but maybe the place you have to live isn't where you want, or it's in a small town, or you're far away from home, things like that. So for us, you get to live in one of the most beautiful cities in the whole world at a university that's respected around the world. And our basketball program, has a tradition of excellence, and we're always going to be in the mix for trying to win a national championship. So I think those are the things that we really emphasize when we're talking with recruits. I think the flip side of that is it's demanding. We have expectations. We have high expectations academically. We do have high expectations for, wanting our team to be the best, which has implications for we want players who want to be the best so they can make our team the best it can be. And so I don't think it's a situation where you're going to come in and just be able to coast. You're not going to be able to come in and coast and kind of get away with what you're maybe able to get away with in high school. You're going to have to work. There's going to be challenges. And that's not for everybody. And so I think that, that can be a little intimidating to people for sure. But I think, it makes sure that we're kind of picking the people that are driven in those ways too. You do have to have a high GPA to get into school. That's a fact. But I think when you get those athletes that are just as driven academically and are goal-oriented academically, a lot of those same traits and work ethics are going to also be visible on the court, and in terms of putting hours into developing your game. So I think those are the types of people. They have to be driven, they have to be goal-oriented, they have to want to be as successful as they can be and put in the work to be able to do that. And so I think that's some of the priorities for us, and some of the things. It's kind of like, here's what it is, here's what you need to be able to get into school, here's what you're going to need to do to be a part of the team. Are you willing to do that? And we've had a lot of great players that have risen to that challenge and embraced that challenge, like Erica, like Chris. I know you've had both of them on, and have had a tremendous impact on our program to keep taking us to the next level.
Let's talk about Chris real quick. So one of the first big time recruits you guys got when you got there as a coach was Chris. It was a pretty, I remember pretty vividly, it was a pretty serious recruiting battle to get her to go there. She was a late signer, which is always the worst for coaches. You hate late signer. But talk about what made her a great player, and what, some of the characteristics that have made other greats at UBC while you've been there.
I think with Chris, that she was never really outgoing, loud, kind of demanding leader. That was never really her style. She was always, a little bit quieter, but she let her game do the talking. And, and I think there's all sorts of different types of leadership. And with her, she led by example with what she brought to the court with her work ethic, and it's a bit of a cliche that, your best player has to be your hardest worker. There's a reason it's a cliche, because it happens so often. And I think she's definitely an example of that, she kept adding elements to her game every year. She took the defensive side of the game as seriously as she took the offensive side of the game. And I think she led by example. And I think the other part with her in particular is that as she got to her, she had a heavy load right from when she got here. And I think it was her third year. She was named Canada's Player of the Year. It's only a third year, and that's a tremendous accomplishment. And I think she was okay with that and comfortable with that and confident in that, and didn't let it get to her or stress her out at all. Of course, she had moments of stress, and it was, she did a lot for her program. But I think one of the biggest things with her and your senior players in general is they kind of can relax about things a little bit and know that, mistakes aren't final. You can move on. If things don't go your way the first time, you can take action to make things go the way that you want them to go if they haven't gone the way before. And I think that was one of her biggest strengths, is that she knew how to have fun with it and how to work hard with it. And I think when you have a leader that can work but can also relax and enjoy, it's just such a great role model for everyone else on the team.
Yeah, I mean, it is a game. We got to have some fun with this thing, right? So I mean, I think sometimes that's lost on people, but it's good to know that some of the best players have that characteristic. So the next question is this. So you've obviously had a very good career. It's gone really well, but there's always a, like, let's give this young Carrie a little bit of advice. So if you go back and you can give young Carrie a couple words, what would that be?
I think just to kind of that last point with Chris is to enjoy it, to relax about things, you know, control what you can control and let the rest of it go. You know, and I think in my, I remember in my first year on the phone with my mom all the time, and she's like, it's going to turn out in the end. It's going to turn out in the end. And of course, when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to realize that that's how it's going to be. But I think, you know, have a plan, do what you need to do academically, do what you need to do for your training, know what elements you want to add to your game, know how to do that, ask the questions you can, do it, and then let the rest of it go, you know. And I think you have to find moments to make it enjoyable. It can't be stressful all the time. And I think the other piece with that, and we've been talking to our athletes about this a lot, is knowing that, like, when you're feeling things, it's not who you are, it's a feeling that you're having. And what can you do to, what's creating that feeling? What can you do about it? And I think that's the other piece, is just being proactive in the ways that you can. You know, if something is bugging you, ask questions to the people who can make it better. Don't ask questions to your friend who has no influence on the situation. There's one thing, there's a place for venting, but if your friend can't have an impact on the situation, don't ask her. Ask the people who can. And I think that the getting comfortable with those hard situations, the getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, having tough conversations, I think those are important, because those are the ways that you're going to grow and develop, and that you can get some answers to the things that need to be resolved.
Yeah, two huge things you touched on there that I think are, like, so important. Having a mom that actually says, listen, it is going to be okay. Not micromanaging oh my God, what is wrong? Do you need me to bring hair elastics? It's like, no, we're going to be okay. It's going to work out. Don't worry about it. And I think who you talk to is so important, and who you ask for advice. Like, don't ask the bozo in your life for advice. You ask the really smart people who have been through it. Go find the right people for those, because you know, your friend who's not committed to sport doesn't really understand why you're working that hard, doesn't really understand why you're putting in all this effort. And when you tell them you're only playing half the game, I'm only playing half the game, and it's like, they don't know that half the game is a lot of the game. They don't know that there's really good players on the team. Like, they don't have any perspective. So they're going to be like, yeah, I mean, you're wasting your time. Stop doing it. And it's like, what are you asking that person for? Like,
exactly.
What are you talking about? Find the right people to talk to. That's such a great piece of advice, for sure. Last question I'm gonna throw your way is this one. Every rise always has some sort of major adversity you have to overcome. Talk about one or two little pieces that, you know, obviously didn't go your way. You've touched on, you know, not making the national team when you wanted to the most, but you know, maybe something else, something that, you know, kind of had a defining moment, and you had to determine one way or the other where you were going to go, and you picked the right way, kind of deal.
Well, I think that national team one was a big one. Partly, you know, the end of your career is always one, and then it did help navigate and, you know, allow me to get involved at UBC, just with the timing, the way that worked out. I think the other
like, by the way, if you make that team, you can't be a coach at UBC that year, right?
Well, it's funny, because it would have been challenging. It was the year I started at UBC. That fall was when I decided to stop playing. So I think, you know, there is some of that connection there for sure. In terms of time, I'm sure they would have made it work. I think when Randy Knorr was coaching, he was still involved for that first year that he was coaching at UBC. He was still involved with the national team. And I think if that's the situation, you find a way to make it work. And I think just with the other piece of adversity is just, you know, that transition from high school to university that a lot of your girls are going to be making over the next few years, and how hard it was. And like I said, there were so many times, going back and crying on the phone with my mom, this is so hard, and you know, because I failed a midterm, and I'd never failed anything in my whole life, and it's like, well, you know, and the automatic, oh my God, this is not going to be successful for me, you know, I'm not starting, I'm not playing as much. And so just that transition and the challenge that you face that I'd never faced before. So that first year, it was a hard one. It's a hard one for everybody. But I think, you know, it teaches you new skills. It forces you to have to figure out new things in terms of how you're going to study, in terms of, you know, how you're going to manage your time, in terms of how you face adversity. Are you going to have it be a pity party, or are you going to get to work and do something about it? So I think that was probably the biggest moment kind of learning for me, is just that first transition from high school to university. And actually the other piece I would add would be when my son was born. I have a 7-year-old son right now, and just kind of the challenge, and it was a totally new role taking on, and now trying to juggle that with work is another big challenge. And you have to, again, it's just about finding new ways. You know, you have to find something new and do things a little bit better, do things a little bit differently, and, you know, find a way.
Yeah, figure it out. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he seems like a great kid. I've only had him, you know, a couple times, but he seems like a great kid, and it seems like it's working out for you guys at UBC. So Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Anthony. All the best to you guys this summer.
All right, catch up.